Hi guys, Maro here. Very interesting book here which I finished reading about 2 months ago, but I've been meaning to just make a video on it. It's a very interesting book. Beast is a great guy, he's a great rugby player. I'm sure if you follow world rugby at all, you would know him. Born and bred in Zimbabwe, then crossed over going south. He played for the South African team, actually the national team over time, because he managed to switch, and he felt that in South Africa he would pursue his passion more than the opportunities that were available in Zimbabwe. Just one of those couple of stories where you have the big people who are really doing it, the people who are setting records on the African continent, sometimes switching from the countries which they were born to go to other countries where they feel is more competitive. Nothing really bad about it. It's an interesting story, and so let's get right into it. I think it was generally a very interesting book. It was written, Tendai really did write with this guy Andy. I'm not going to attempt to say his surname. Capostagno. I really hope I didn't butcher Andy's name, but this is the guy who helped Tendai to come up with this story. And so the voices that you find in the book, they're a little bit quite varied. You find Tendai's voice, of course, mainly featuring. You also find Andy's voice when he switches, because he's a journalist, and so he tries to also cover some parts when he was actually interacting with other fellow South African rugby players, asking them their opinions on Tendai. And then you also get the side of Tendai from his family, and then you also get to hear the side of the story from his dear wife, Koziwa, who is such an amazing person as well. I've seen some of her videos in which she was showing around the Mtawarira home on YouTube, which is she's really an amazing character. But let's get right into it and figure out what my best part really was. So I think the first part really, as you're starting this book, you have this part here on page 2, just as you're starting the book, where he tries to explain where he thinks his sporting passion comes from. And he explains it that it comes not just from his dad's side, but from his mom's side. It's just a few sentences I'll read here. He said, my dad was a good tennis player and also a Chelsea supporter, which of course I am. Chelsea's a great team. And he said, whereas for himself, I've always been a Manchester United fan, but I think my sporting genes come from my mom's side of the family. And then he said she was a good netball player and her cousins were all good at sport, which is so interesting. You get introduced to this family where not only have you had, the dad playing tennis, but you also have the mom playing netball. And so I guess most of the things that you face as you try to observe African families is that you have parents saying, well, focus on your education more. But I think Tendai was lucky here to actually come from a family that had a sort of a background in sport. Of course, as you go through the book, you see that it was not actually as easy as I say. His parents also wanted him to focus a little bit on his academics compared to the rugby. And on page 8 here, you have like a very interesting point as well. And Tendai is really describing something which I would sum up by saying, if you really need something, you have to fight for it. It was just an interesting, interesting part. And he was talking about his life, how he had been at Churchill for his high school from 1 to 4, and how he really wanted to go to Peterhouse, which is along the Harare-Mutare highway. For those who have used it in Zimbabwe, it's an amazing private school, and he really felt that by going to Peterhouse, he would have his dreams, go up to a top notch. And so go up a notch higher, not to a top notch. But it was a very interesting part. And here he talks about the fact where he had been at Churchill, he knew he was going to go back to Churchill, but he just didn't feel that at Churchill there was enough competition for him to get to the competitive leagues of maybe South African rugby. And so he felt that he had to take matters into his own hands and actually travel to Peterhouse, in which case he would then go and plead with the Peterhouse authorities that he really needed to be let in, and possibly through a scholarship, because of course Peterhouse is a very expensive school. So he narrates these things here, and he said, I had always been strong-willed. When I want something, I go for it with everything that I have. I thought, no one is going to fight for you. You have to fight for yourself. I didn't tell anyone at school or in my family. I didn't even tell Peterhouse I was coming. And the next day, dressed in my church uniform, I took a chicken bus and rode 45-minute trip from Harare to Marondera. A chicken bus is one of those old buses where people either stand or sit on the floor, and there are chickens and goats on board as well. I mean, I hadn't been, probably I wasn't old enough in this time, but I don't think there are chickens and goats in chicken buses, at least the ones I've used from Harare to Nyanga in my rural area. But it's interesting here, the portrayal that he gives of Zimbabwean chicken buses. But as we continue, you see, he says, but when we got to Marondera, the bus cruised past Peter House, and I had to run forward and tell the driver that this was my stop. So I got off and I walked back and I went to the school entrance. I thought, wow, I'm here. I was nervous, butterflies in my stomach, and he got into the school. And of course, as you know, or for others who have followed his story as they know, is that he actually managed to convince the headmaster here, and that even though their school policy was that they would not give full scholarships, they managed to get convinced by this guy, an amazing guy, Beast, convinced them that really he really deserved it. He had the talent, he had the drive, he was willing to do anything, and Tendai achieved his dream by taking a chicken bus. And so if you're out there, really, if you really think that there's something you can't do, sometimes all it takes is just a strong will, get into a chicken bus and go and talk to people. And then on page 17 here, here's something which is interesting, which I sum up with, you have to make connections in order to survive. And so here's just a small part. And he says, at my first year at Peter House went by so quickly, but I enjoyed every moment. The rugby was great, but perhaps more importantly, I found a way to cure my hunger for food. Of course, as you read this book, you realize that Tendai is a guy who gets hungry very fast. I mean, he's a very big guy, and he says he's always having an appetite and he wants to eat. And so because of that, Tendai really needed food almost every time. And he said, I got to know the kitchen staff and they became my buddies. And so every time there were leftovers, they would give me a heads up. You see, the power of connections right here, ladies and gentlemen. As you're making your connections all over the world, you gotta realize there are some things that at some point you just gotta walk up to people and tell them, look guys, I have a hunger problem. If there are any leftovers, please do not hesitate to contact me. It was a great part. I just loved how he was being honest in all this book, and he was telling us really how his life was going on as a high school student. It's amazing. I mean, you have so many successful people writing their stories, but you don't find people who are honest as much to tell you that really they were in boarding school and they felt that the food was not enough, and so they had to go to the kitchen staff and ask, you guys, please give me some food if there is anything left. Let's jump to page 29. It was also interesting here. Some opportunities will come in life, and of course this one is another opportunity of food. Tendai at this point, page 29, he was now in South Africa. He had just arrived there and he was still trying to navigate everything. Of course, he didn't come from a very wealthy family, and so his father and his mother had just given him just enough for him to survive. But of course, as I said, the beast needs to be fed. And so because of that, the beast was looking for more food. So it's just a little bit at the bottom part of page 28. And it says, I was hungry for success and also hungry for food. The restaurant Seekers at Suncoast Casino on the Durban beachfront had a special Thursday every Thursday. A kilo of steak, 500 grams of chip, and a liter of cold drink. If you could finish that in 30 minutes, they would give it to you for free. Well, the first time I did it, I finished it in 12 minutes. 30 minutes was what they required. This guy finished it in 12 minutes. Okay, a new record, exclamation mark. They couldn't believe it. They actually searched me to see if I wasn't hiding some chips. But that was me. No indigestion problem, no problem. I went back a few more times and they started adding ice cream to the challenge to make it more difficult. But I still finished on time. As far as I was concerned, it was free food. I was poor, so every Thursday Craig Barron, who is a colleague, would pick me up and we would go to Seekers. Sometimes Craig wouldn't eat anything himself, but he would just watch me, and we did that for a whole year. Eventually, the management said, sorry, but this is too much. I was banned. Yes, you heard that right. He just broke records so much in this eating competition that they said, look, this guy doesn't qualify anymore. No problem, his friend Craig said. There's another Seekers in town, and they also have the same special. We'll go there. But when we got there, what do you think happened? Okay, I'll finish it. There was a picture of me on the wall saying, this man is not allowed to take the challenge anymore. The beast was banned from this competition that happened at this restaurant. Wow, it was just another part of him, being honest, and him being vulnerable about his weakness for loving food, and how he has gone to great lengths, this guy, to get as much food as he can into his system. As you can see, it's a beast. It needs to be fed. All right. And so you jump to page 94. It was very interesting other parts that were coming, but page 94 was also interesting. Here he's talking about the fact that you just have to work hard because you don't actually know who is watching. There are some people in life who watch you, who are very big people, and you actually don't know it. And so if you are doing anything you're doing that could be in the public domain, just work as hard as you can. Because you never know who is going to watch whatever you produce, whatever the output of your work. You don't know who is actually watching. Maybe a member of the management board of your company is watching. And so let's hear what happened here. Beast, at this point, he was having problems with his visa. At that point, after some years of playing for the South African national rugby team, actually, a couple of people started saying that, but this guy is from Zimbabwe. I mean, he shouldn't really be playing for the South African side. Even though meritocratically they agreed that this guy was a great rugby player and there were very few people who could compete with him, they still said, based on his citizenship, he shouldn't compete. And so at this point, he was going up and about trying to get help from the coaches so that he would get a South African passport so that he would actually be able to play for the South African rugby team. And so he says, during those 3 weeks when the Boks were playing at home, I was shuttling between Reagan and Michelle at Home Affairs. Michelle was a contact he had at Home Affairs in South Africa who was trying to help him process his passport. I started to think that this was probably not going to work out, him getting the passport. But at the very moment I was about to give up, I received a phone call, and that call changed everything. I got a call from a friend saying, "Hey Beast, the Arch wants to speak with you. Make sure your phone is on." The Arch is the Archbishop. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. I answered and a voice said, "Is that Beast? It's the Arch here." It was none other than Archbishop Desmond Tutu on the other line. He said, "I love what you do for South Africa. Every time you get the ball, the crowds shout, 'Beast!'" Well, maybe that's not how the crowds shout. I'm just trying to say out this beast part. "And I think it's fantastic. You're a great ambassador and a role model. You represent the whole thing that has happened to you is unfair and unjust." This is what the ambassador, this is what the Archbishop thought. The Archbishop really thought that the whole thing, that Beast was being disqualified to play for the South African team based on the fact that he was Zimbabwean, was really unfair. I was surprised. This is now Beast speaking. I was surprised, and the Arch even knew about me. But he said, "I love rugby. I watch it all the time." It was an amazing conversation because I was just thinking, wow, he was just so chilled and nice. And I guess this was the answer to my prayers, and my fiance and I had started sharing on the South Coast. The Arch knew that I was a man of God, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm going to sort this out for you. Keep on training, playing well, and leave it to me. I will resolve this. You will get your citizenship and you'll be able to play for the Springboks." As soon as he hung up, my spirits were lifted, went through the roof straight to cloud 9. Now I had someone serious on my side. Within a week, I got a call from the office of the Minister of Home Affairs of South Africa, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, who said, "Of course, come and get your passport." Wow. I was told to fly up to Pretoria with my documents. And so you see here, this was a very interesting part because, had he not been playing very well, not actually knowing who was there, there's so many people who would just spring up at some point when you're not actually sure. This just another amazing part. You can say whatever you want, but this guy just, he had his life. He was working hard as he can. He didn't try to complain. He just kept at it. He's a Christian. He kept praying and he kept hoping that something would happen. And boom, the Archbishop came to his help. And so, I get here, I switch to page 98. This is like the best chapter of the book. If you're going to get this book, and if you're not going to read any chapter, just go and read chapter 10 Beauty and the Beast. This is like the best chapter, where the Beast is talking, of course, about how he fell in love with Kuziwa. I mean, I wish I could read the whole chapter to you, but then of course it wouldn't be fair. So I'll just read, I think what was my favorite part. On page 99, the year was 2008, and it was my breakthrough season. When it was all happening for me, I made a debut for the box, and then things went on to my head. I was excited, I was young, I was living the dream. I started to get up to no good, lost my way a bit. And that's when I discovered that mothers have some kind of sixth sense. He was talking about his mother at this point, what his mother did. They know when something's up with their kids. So sometime in June, my mom called and he said, Tendai, I've been praying, I've put my trust in God and for your life. And the funny thing is that I had a vision while I was in church. My mom is a very spiritual person, and she tries her best to live the life that is consistent with her faith. She told me that in the vision, she saw a girl who goes to our church in Harare, and she saw the two of us getting married. She said, I really feel that this has come directly from God. And I'm just saying that for the sake of it, and I'm not just saying that for the sake of it. On the other end of the line, I was just shaking my head and thinking, let's move on, change the subject please. But she wouldn't take no for an answer, and he said, you really have to meet her. I believe that is your wife. The girl in question ran a Sunday school class at the Apostolic Faith Mission Center in Harare, and that's where my mother had seen her. Her father, Masimba Makore, had been a main pastor at the church, but he had passed on a few years prior. This was an interesting book. This is just, I didn't anticipate to meet this. But the fact that, this guy was, again, busy with his life, everything was going on, he's a Christian, he believes, of course, your mother at some point will say something. And when you read this part, you're just like, yeah, of course, the mother will say something, but that's not going to work out. But, well, you got to read the chapter for your own, because some things that mothers start sometimes could actually end up getting to a proposal. Wow. And so, well, let me just spoil it a little bit for you. They actually did talk on the phone. They realized that they couldn't stop talking over the phone, and they would spend hours over hours or speaking over the phone. But then, of course, Kuziwa had her doubts. She was just like, this guy is, he's famous, he's in South Africa, he's playing, I've seen on magazines. Doesn't he just want to use me so that he can please his mother, yet he just has other girls in South Africa? But of course, the Beast was serious. He put his mind to it, and he realized, this is probably what I want. And so on page 106 here, you get to the proposal. I mean, it's the Beast. He has to be different. So he's talking. At first, I thought it would be best if it was just the two of us, him and Kuziwa, the new girl he was now crazy heads over heels over after they had, lit it up their chemistry over the phone. And then he said, I thought, no, let's make it a party. So I invited one of my really good friends from church, Kudzai, and her husband Israel, my mom of course, and Ray, who was living with me anyway. Ray is the brother of the Beast. Ku takes up the story. At this point, this is Andy picking up. And she said, this is now cool. She said, well, Friday comes and everyone in the house is dressed up and Ray is filming people with his camcorder and I still have no idea what's going on. They were in South Africa at this point and Ku had visited the Beast. Of course, under that agreement, Ku's mother agreed that she would only go if she was going with the Beast's mother, so that she would go and see this boy and really see for herself if he was serious about this. And then now she continues. We get to the restaurant and I'm expecting a 40-seater table because I had been lied that it was for rugby boys. Meanwhile, there's just 6 of us. This Tracy Chapman song comes and he gets on one knee. I have no idea what he said because my ears had started ringing and I was in such shock. But fortunately, I knew what the answer was. Of course it was what? It was yes. So he dropped the diamond in my hand and he told me to go and design a ring around it. Yeah. There are some things you can do when you are the Beast. part of that is you could just get a diamond instead of getting a diamond ring. I mean, you could get a diamond yourself. Of course, the beast at this point, he had many influential friends, and one of the people he knew was a diamond trader. So he was just like, you know what? We're not going to waste time going to get rings. We're just going to get a diamond. And then she is going to design whatever ring she wants around the diamond. Of course, ladies and gentlemen, it pays to be the beast. And of course, I'm sure it feels good to be the beast's fiance. So, after this happened, of course, Ku said yes. They had their fun. And then she said, and then it continues here with Andy, who says, Ku's ears may have been ringing, but unfortunately, Tendai remembers what he said. I told her that she had changed my life, that I had fallen in love, and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. My heart was racing as I pulled out the diamond, and she was astonished, but she said yes, and everyone in the restaurant went nuts. It was a great night, but eventually Ku had to return to Zimbabwe to go back to school and to get back to and I had to get back to the Sharks. She was in her final year and she was writing her A-levels, and I didn't want to distract her too much, but I went to visit her in Zim whenever I could. Well, this was a great life story. I mean, I wouldn't want to lie. It was amazing. Okay, so we go here to page 112. Of course, the book is not just all about the good things, that happened in the beast's life. Sometimes he actually does take a detour and he talks about the things that, really affected him badly. And here on page 112, he's talking about, a health problem he had. He just had a problem with his heart. I think it was beating too fast, and it was a condition that he knew that this is not the rate at which his heart was beating, especially even since he had been an athlete for, the bigger part of his life, and he knew that even if he worked out or even if he played a game, there was supposed to be a certain level of, normalcy in his heart rate. And so he said after this problem was happened and it actually affected him, I think on the pitch, he said they had to do a couple of assessments, and by that time they knocked me out with a general anesthetic and applied a defibrillator. My heart had been racing for about 2 hours. Using a defibrillator is like jump starting a car. They attach wires to your chest and they shock you with it. When I came around, they told me that my heart was now beating normally and that the next step was to sort it out so that it wouldn't happen again. Obviously, the first thing I wanted to know was whether I could still play rugby, and they reassured me that it shouldn't affect my career, but that I shouldn't expect that it shouldn't happen too often. The doctor mentioned a specialist in Cape Town, one of the best in the world, a cardiac ablation operation that corrects irregular heart rhythm, cardiac arrhythmia, and this is what I had to go and have. I was told that if it happened again, this was the guy who I had to contact. So it's just interesting part here. He's talking about his health, he's talking, getting again, of course, vulnerable with the reader, which was just an amazing thing, because you don't see many of these successful people telling you about the highs and the lows. You're just gonna tell I started this chicken empire with just one feather, and from there on I was just blasting through success and there was nothing that derailed me. But here the beast, of course, if you're an athlete, you would know at this point after reading this book and be like, wow, setbacks might come even health wise, but you could still continue on with your career as long as it's discovered early and as long as you can find people who will help you. Page 170. Adapt your personality. The beast, what we know, the side of the beast that we knew. Of course, after you're reading this book, you realize that there are actually so many other sort of different sides of the beast. If you're just a rugby fan, you'd think the beast is just one guy who is aggressive as he is on the pitch and everything else, and it's just all his aggression. But he actually talks about here and he says, you know what, I'm actually a different person, at least when he's home. So he said the persona of the beast is something I lock away somewhere and then I bring it out in a match situation. When I'm at home, I'm a dad to my children and a good husband to my wife. So I have to separate the two because I can't be aggressive all the time. But when I'm at work, I pull the sharks of the Springboks jersey, and that's my Superman time, and I flick the switch so as to become the beast. So of course, I guess this is just general advice to everyone. I mean, you can have the same character, but if you're required to be a scary boss at work, to the extent that you think your employees will actually be motivated by a scary boss, at least when you get home, you meet your parents, when you meet your family, you gotta be a little bit toned down. I can be, whatever I think I am here on my YouTube channel, but of course, believe me, when my mother calls me, I just have to relax. I'm like, what is it? Of course, I have to listen. I'm still a small boy, even though I might think that I'm growing up in my 20s. She still sees me as the young kid. And so I get here, which is, I think, the last point I want to highlight in this book. I think I've gone for a long talking, but this was an amazing book. I mean, here he's talking about giving back. Remember when I talked about his passport and his issues? Of course, the people in South Africa were pushing to say, look, some people, at least, not all of them, some people in South Africa were pushing to say, no, this guy can't play for the South African team. He's Zimbabwean. He really can't do it. But then, of course, as we saw there, the Archbishop called him. Everything was sorted after he went up to Pretoria. He got his passport and he managed to successfully play for the South African team. But of course, even some people back home in Zimbabwe were also very mad about this. I mean, imagine you have this star, rugby player you have who you think could help lift the national team, but then the guy just decides to go and play in a neighboring country. So this was also when he was talking about the fact that him deciding to go to South Africa doesn't mean that he doesn't love the Zimbabwe. I mean, this guy loves Zimbabwe as much as I could get from this book. And as he starts, getting to the end of the book, page 108, you're winding down, he's talking about, what he thinks could happen in the future as he's retiring from his career. Of course, this book was actually released before they won the World Cup of Rugby, but he's just talking about what he thinks the future will be. And he says, I also want to make a difference back home in Zimbabwe. When Robert Mugabe stepped down as president, there were parties all over the world, and we hoped that things would get better in Zimbabwe. But less than a year later, it's as bad as it has ever been. Well, if this book had been released a little bit later, I'm guessing the sentiment could have been still the same. I think Zimbabwe, if you're watching this video as it's getting released, there's kind of a little bit of skirmishes happening there. It's not really, the land that we always dream it would be as Zimbabweans, and hopefully you take a time to, just pray for us and pray for the nation so that it gets better and that, we solve at least, the economic puzzle of it and get to the political side. It's as Biss says, it's as bad as it has ever been. So it's tough and it's hard to see how things are going to ever improve. Too hard to see if things are ever going to improve there. Some people in Zimbabwe believe that because I left the country to pursue my dream, I'm a traitor. They think that because now I live in South Africa, I've forgotten where I came from. Well, I've dreamt about being a professional rugby player since I was 16 years old, and I couldn't fulfill my dream in Zimbabwe. I had to come to South Africa and I had to work so hard to reach my goal. And then I had to work even harder to stay there. I love Zimbabwe and I want to see it come back up again. South Africans who say that there are parallels between their country and Zim are wrong. South Africa is a million miles away from Zim. One of my new goals is to try and make Zimbabwe rugby a power again, one that can make it to the World Cup and compete at that level. I want to establish an academy in Zimbabwe, partly because one of the things that led me to South Africa was that there was no professional facility for me in Zim to get the right coaching, nutrition, training, you name it. So my dream is to take what I have learned here and bring it back home. And so, of course, as you read through, the Biss ends actually with an interesting chapter where he talks about his dream team and what he would pick if he was actually going to pick a dream team for him for rugby. Of course, I'm not a big rugby fan. I mean, I went to a boys' high school where there was rugby, very aggressive sport. Of course, you would understand I wouldn't qualify, seeing I don't really have so much muscle. So, I've just been watching it from the sidelines. It's interesting. The last topic is actually really interesting to people who are actually fans of rugby. If you want to see, he talks about, why he would pick this person into his dream team and what the tactics they bring to the game and who they are and everything else. Of course, I was just reading through that and I couldn't understand some of the terms, but I'm pretty sure some of my friends who are, aggressive rugby players and rugby supporters would love this. I mean, even if you're not actually a rugby player or a rugby supporter, this book is really amazing because it talks about the life of a man who had to endure so much. A guy who had a dream, a guy who, in primary school, he was identified as a little bit aggressive, and the teachers thought that they would send him to rugby so that he would channel his aggression there. It turns out that was the best decision that his teachers in primary school made, because he actually found rugby to be an avenue to channel his aggression because of his big body size. A guy who grew up, always feeling hungry and trying to navigate through this. A guy who was called a traitor by his country, but because he really wanted to pursue a dream and he really wanted to make it to the world scale. A guy who, was later celebrated by the country that, at some point didn't want to give him a visa. This guy, of course, as I say, it was part of the Rugby World Cup winning side for South Africa. He's an amazing guy. I love his story. I love, recently I saw a video that he posted on his Twitter. I just follow him. He's a very inspirational guy. And of course, if you want to buy this book, I'm pretty sure you can find it on Amazon. I mean, I really haven't checked that. I bought this book in Johannesburg at the airport in actually last year when I was coming back here to school. And so it's an amazing book. I would really hope you guys get a chance to pick it up. I would really hope you guys, if you have other books that you have enjoyed that are written in Africa for African entrepreneurs, for African record setters, for African innovators, please do leave them in the comments below so that I also get to know what you guys are reading, and of course so that next time I might be able to come and evaluate your book right here on Maro Books. I mean, until next time, unless there's anything else other than you subscribing, sharing this video with all your friends so that they also get to get this inspiration, I mean, I'll see you then. So thank you so much for watching.